Members, this is the appointed time and we have a quorum. Welcome to the meeting of the subcommittee to study the effectiveness, costs and management of public works projects. We have only one item on the agenda, but before we do that, let's discuss the following. The administration provided a response paper to the issues raised at the meeting of the 19th of July 2024. That's CB bracket 11279/2024 The administration also gave a written response to the letter penned by Mr. Gary Zhang on following up on the double envelope tendering approach dated the 23rd of August 2024, CB bracket 11280/2024 bracket 01. Now let's move on to the agenda proper, examining the key factors for the high construction cost in Hong Kong. Let's invite the administration to come in. We have, I believe, ample time for members today, so I will give each member 5 minutes questions and answers, please. I am giving more time for members to help members put their question and help the administration give a thorough response. We will invite the administration to walk us through the paper. Chairman, if I may, I will deliver opening remarks and then I will give the floor to my colleagues to go through the PowerPoint presentation. On the last occasion, we gave members an overview of the Hong Kong construction cost and prevailing cost management measures. And once again, I thank members for their invaluable views. These views are very useful in helping us formulate cost management measures as well as taking forward the strategic study that we are currently conducting. We'd like to explain to members our progress of the strategic study as well as review of the reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong. Now we are faring quite well in terms of infrastructure projects. We are happy to announce that according to the latest World Competitiveness Yearbook 2024 published by the International Institute for Management Development based in Lausanne, Switzerland, we climbed 2 places from 2023 to the 9th position globally in terms of infrastructure, and we've also been ranked top 3 for years. Now for infrastructure, it covers different areas such as drainage, roads, etc. It shows that we have been recognized for the effectiveness in taking forward infrastructure projects. Meanwhile, we've also implemented cost control measures in recent years. Now, in fact, according to the International Construction Cost Index in recent years, the ranking of Hong Kong has dropped somewhat. Still, construction costs remain relatively high. This is a concern of members and of the subcommittee. And last year, in the 4th quarter, we commenced a strategic study on construction costs to identify the major reasons for high construction costs and formulate strategic measures to control construction cost. And while doing so, we hope to maintain high quality development to make more effective use of public resources for infrastructure development so as to strengthen Hong Kong's long-term competitiveness. We engaged a consultant to conduct the strategic study, and we have made a lot of progress. The study has made reference to different project types and analyzed the relevant data. We also compare the cost of project types between Hong Kong and that of other neighboring and developed cities such as London, New York, Singapore, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou to conduct in-depth analysis of the cost structure and percentage shares so as to identify the reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong. We've also exchanged views with the stakeholders of the industry on the study findings, including contractor associations, engineers, and other professionals. We met with 15 groups and we held numerous meetings to gauge their views so as to collate and analyze their feedback in order to give us a full picture of the construction industry in Hong Kong. Now, according to the strategic study, there are 5 major reasons for the high construction costs. Labor costs, contract risk premium on construction materials, equipment, design standards, requirements, etc. Now, there are different factors at play when it comes to construction costs. We will go through them in greater detail in a moment, and members may also wish to refer to the paper we've already submitted. And with these remarks, Chairman, we'd like to now throw open the discussion, and we'd like to exchange views with members on reasons for the high construction costs in Hong Kong. Members' views will help us deepen the strategic study as well as formulate cost control measures. It will also help us accord priority to them. And at subsequent meetings, we'll continue to brief members on other aspects and seek members' views in these areas. And without further ado, I will now give the floor to my colleague to walk members through the reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong. Thank you, Chairman, members. Thank you, Permanent Secretary, for the introduction. This is the second meeting, so do allow me to go through the paper with members and review the reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong. Permanent Secretary for Development Works, Mr. Lau, just walk us through the ranking of Hong Kong, and according to the latest World Competitiveness Yearbook 2024, published by the IMD, we climbed 2 places to the 5th position in the global ranking. And in terms of infrastructure, we rose notably to the 9th position globally. It reflects that Hong Kong has been recognized for the effectiveness in delivering capital projects in recent years. Now, construction costs in Hong Kong have all along been one of the highest in the world. Regarding the International Construction Cost Index, we have ranked the top for many years. Hong Kong is an international city. We have relatively high standard of living. We're also one of the most densely populated cities in the world. And on top of that, the geographical conditions in Hong Kong are quite complex. Despite all these, with the help of the industry, after introducing strategic measures by the Development Bureau, our ranking has dropped to the 9th position in the 2024. But according to this slide, as you can see, we are still the top in Asia. And that is why in the 4th quarter of last year, we commenced a strategic study on construction costs to identify the major reasons and formulate strategic measures to control costs by drawing on mainland and international experience. We take a macro view, and the study reviews, collates, analyzes the views of various stakeholders from the local construction sector to ensure that the study findings can adequately reflect their actual situation. The study has made reference to different project types of Hong Kong in the past, compared the cost of different project types between Hong Kong and that of other more developed cities. We've also made reference to the works experience of mainland and overseas to understand the project cost structure and the percentage shares. We also exchange views with the stakeholders and study findings and collect their feedbacks to help us map our way forward. There may be differences in construction cost structures of different projects, but overall speaking, there are 4 major types of construction costs. 1, construction labor costs accounting for about 30 to 40%. 2, construction material and equipment costs accounting for about 25 to 35%. Machinery costs accounting for about 10 to 20%. And risk premium arising from project complexity, as well as operating costs and profits of contractors accounting for about 10 to 30%. And they're directly affected by changes in market prices, such as the prices of labor, machinery, and materials. And apart from the construction costs, project costs are also affected by other factors such as the economic cycle, different tendering strategies of contractors. For example, some contractors may lower the tender prices in order to increase their market shares. On the contrary, some contractors may increase the tender prices under the situation that their companies have been awarded a lot of works contracts. Overall speaking, an increase or decrease in construction costs may not be closely followed by project costs. The strategic study will focus on construction costs, as mentioned before, with a view to controlling construction costs through strategic measures. We've also compared Hong Kong in terms of the major construction cost and percentage share with other places. And there are 5 major reasons: labor cost, risk premium of construction material equipment, design standards requirements, approval process, and project complexity. I will go through each of them with you. First, labor cost. Labor cost accounts for 30 to 40% of overall construction costs and is affected by worker wages and the number of working hours required for projects. High labor costs will directly result in high construction costs. Take a look at the right-hand side of this slide. As you can see, the average wages of Hong Kong construction workers are about 20 to 30% lower than those of London and New York, but about 70% higher than those of Singapore and approximately 3 times higher than those of Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. The strategic study evaluates the wage levels. We analyzed various factors, including Hong Kong's living standards, the wage of non-supervisory trades, demand and supply of workers, and it is considered that the wages of Hong Kong workers are at a reasonable level. And there is another factor at play, that is the aging workforce. The average age of construction workers in Hong Kong is 47. 40% of semi-skilled workers and skilled workers in Hong Kong's industry are 55 years old or above. The problem of aging construction for labor force is obviously more serious than that in other cities. In fact, for the number of working hours of workers required in Hong Kong, the mandates for projects for 1 billion Hong Kong dollars is higher than other places. The aging construction labor force will have a direct bearing on overall productivity, resulting in the longer construction periods and hence higher costs. On top of that, we adopt a relatively labor-dependent construction method, thus aggravating the problem of aging workers on productivity, resulting in longer hours for project completion. And as a result of aging workers, high labor costs becomes one of the major factors of high construction costs in Hong Kong. The next point is about construction or contract risk premium on construction materials and equipment. These account for about 25 to 35% of overall construction costs. Construction materials mainly used in Hong Kong include reinforcement bars, steel, concrete, copper wires, timber. Considering that we adopt a competitive global procurement model, their basic prices are generally comparable to those of other developed cities. Most of the main contractors in Hong Kong are adopting works procurement models in such a way that after contracted the entire works through tendering, they will subdivide the works and then subcontract them to different subcontractors with labor and materials inclusive. The subcontractors will then procure materials and equipment from sub-manufacturers around the world. We understand that some contractors will procure the materials and equipment directly from suppliers such as rebars. According to data collected and discussion with stakeholders, the price difference between these two procurement models could be more than 10%. The main difference is that the main contractor can obtain competitive prices by bulk purchasing, whilst reducing the risk premium added to the cost of materials and equipment by subcontractors at each tier. The study shows that the higher the uniqueness of the construction material and equipment required, the profits and risk premiums will be high, especially in the absence of market competition, especially for coolers, etc. The study also points out that the subcontracting procurement model with labor and materials inclusive has been practiced in Hong Kong for many years. There are merits despite having management costs and risk premium implications. For example, in complex mega projects, the main contractor can employ subcontracting arrangements to increase their flexibility in response to unstable construction volume. The main contractor can also select specialist contractors with professional knowledge through subcontracting arrangements to carry out the relevant works for enhanced efficiency. Third point, design standards and requirement. Hong Kong's prevailing design standards and requirements are compared with those in the mainland and UK and Europe, and the result reveals that we are at international standard with additional requirement tailored for local conditions. In some specific standards, like the design compressive strength of concrete and bearing capacity of foundation, the differences may be greater. In light of the recent developments, Hong Kong has been adopting these standards for a long time, and we need a review and optimization. One example is high-strength steel. This is a recent example of lowering construction costs and increasing efficiency. The high-strength steel can be used in various projects because of its unique nature. It's stronger and lighter than traditional steel, and it's easier to lift and transport, and can also save material requirements. And they have been deployed in cross-link projects at Yunnan Stadium, and they can be used for building noise barriers, and therefore driving down construction costs. The other example is to review the bearing capacity of foundation. Now, after conducting analysis and tests, we reviewed the bearing capacity for foundation, and the CDD has agreed to raise the allowable bearing capacity for foundation from 5,000 kPa to 7,500 kPa, so as to enhance the cost effectiveness by using fewer piles. The Buildings Department has also incorporated this practice for the whole industry's benefit.
Next, on the approval process, we have analyzed the approval process in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we have a set of comprehensive and rigorous approval processes among government departments, consulting firms, resident site staff, contractors and subcontractors. Various monitoring systems and approval processes are strictly followed throughout the project delivery. In different construction stages, we need to refer to different government departments for approval of the stages. For example, if contractors need to submit the documents to main contractors for approval, when the main contractors receive these documents, they will have to go through an approval process, after which they will be handed back to the resident site staff. This is time-consuming, and we have already taken note of that. In the past few decades, government departments and supervisors have been reviewing and adjusting the critical hold points and inspection frequencies of construction process, aiming at continuously improving their monitoring mechanism in order to enhance quality control requirements. For example, for environmental impact assessment (EIA), in recent years we have already streamlined the requirements, which is more time saving. We have managed to reduce time costs as a result. There's a lot of paperwork, and there are also approval processes which not only affect the efficiency of the works, there need to be more manpower in order to handle the project. The strategic study shows that project teams spend about 30% to 40% on paperwork in design and construction stages. That is more time-consuming as a result. More manpower is required in order to address all these concerns and go through all the processes. Earlier on, the Development Bureau has already introduced a series of initiatives to streamline planning and administrative processes about development at the panel on development. We'll further review and optimize the approval processes during the design and construction stages. The aim is to reduce the manpower demands for project teams and construction costs. The last one, we've come to project complexity. We have a hilly terrain. Hong Kong is densely populated. We also have varied geological conditions, hence the many constraints about work projects in Hong Kong. Project teams will design the work proposals in order to suit the existing unique geographical conditions. For some major district-wide road projects, for example, the road alignments would face restrictions brought about by existing buildings and future developments in the area. The project team might need to consider various alternatives to overcome the constraints. For example, tunnel construction might have to be considered. In the Public Works Subcommittee, we explained the unique features of different projects to members of the subcommittee. There are also challenges when it comes to carrying out works in a densely populated city. Project teams have to minimize the impact on the public through various arrangements or design alterations. They include traffic diversion arrangements, mitigation measures on environmental impact to the neighborhood, restrictions on construction time, etc. In fact, of the top 10 cities in the International Construction Cost Index, most of which are international cities with high living standards and development density, they will inevitably impose certain impact on the public, while the public, various stakeholders, and government-related statutory bodies will also have certain expectations and requirements on the construction works. These requirements will have a direct bearing on the project design, construction efficiency, and cost. We have mentioned the aging of construction workers, low productivity, risk premium due to procurement approach, high design standards and requirements, as well as lengthy approval processes. Therefore, we are reviewing our existing procurement approach, consultancy studies, technology application, approval procedure, and workflow in order to work out the proposed measures and their detailed way forward. We will continue to work closely with members and the industry stakeholders on strategies to control the costs of public works projects (PWP). We will optimize the proposals, set out short, medium, and long-term measures, and set out priorities and implement the relevant measures in a timely manner. Thank you. The floor is now open for questions. Members can now ask questions. The first member, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Construction costs in Hong Kong are high. The construction time is also lengthy. Many may think that when the construction time is longer, then the sector is bound to earn more. But the reality is exactly the opposite. The longer construction time results in a lose-lose situation. There's no win at all. There's no winner in this situation. Rumor has it that some large-scale construction companies are faced with financial difficulties. These have sounded an alarm bell. In this paper and the PowerPoint presentation, we have looked into the reasons for the high construction costs of the PWPs. In paragraph 22, it sets out several reasons. The aging of construction workers, low productivity, risk premium due to procurement approach, high design standards and requirements, and lengthy approval processes. These are the main factors. We need to applaud the Development Bureau for being very pragmatic in this paper. They did not evade our concerns. The document and the PowerPoint presentation given to us just now are very pragmatic. They are in touch with the reality. We thank the Development Bureau for calling a spade a spade. They did not evade any concerns or questions. They faced the situation head on. This is worth our commendation so that we can solve the problem in a more appropriate manner. In relation to the issue on the aging of construction workers, we also have a manpower crunch in the industry. It has been affecting the industry. The average age of construction workers is 47. For semi-skilled workers and skilled workers, they are as old as 55 years old. The aging of construction workers has to do with the lack of manpower in this industry. Therefore, quite many enterprises or companies are worried about not being able to win the tender. And even if they win the tender, they lack manpower to carry out the works. There are short-term initiatives to introduce manpower. These measures are rolled out by the government, but the lack of manpower in the grassroots or in the frontline positions is indeed a structural problem. They will give you all the details about different population groups, for example, residents or mobile labor. But in fact, we are faced with our manpower shortage. So I'd like to know whether the authority has any measure to tackle this problem. In the development panel, the Development Bureau has already said that they are taking stock of the situation. They have already made different amendments in order to streamline the processes, such as the town planning processes. But we are yet to reach the win-win situation. So I'd like to know whether the Development Bureau has any concrete timeline so that we can strive for improvements. So it's about timeline. Yes, thank you, Permanent Secretary. Regarding labor costs, productivity is key. We have quite a lot of laborers in Hong Kong. They have been a pillar of our construction industry. It is also in line with the government's initiative to accord priority to local workers. Take London, for example. The daily wage of workers is higher than those in Hong Kong. But then the number of working hours is less than those in Hong Kong. So the cost for projects is overall lower than that in Hong Kong. We are conducting studies including how to better harness technology in projects and how to enhance productivity by carrying out works off the site. We can also encourage the use of robotics in order to enhance productivity for projects in Hong Kong. For local laborers, we want them to upskill. That's a way to enhance their productivity. We have different measures for semi-skilled workers or for general workers. How can we upskill these workers so that they can become semi-skilled workers or even skilled workers, so we can reduce labor costs as a result? Regarding approval processes, the industry also told us their views. The Development Bureau has reviewed the processes, especially at the design and construction, the pre-construction stages. Whether the design and construction stages, there are quite a lot of approval processes involved. For example, in the construction stage, we receive papers from contractors. There are also material tests, approval processes, works procedures. For example, after bars are banded, we need to check the quality of these bars. We also need to address issues about temporary traffic diversion arrangements. We're going to take a more macro approach. In other words, we'll check check the necessity of the processes to see whether we can streamline the processes. Are there any repeated processes? Is there any room for further streamlining the processes? There are many requirements in the processes. However, with technological advancements, is it possible to streamline the processes by doing away with some arrangements or some requirements in the stages? Those who are responsible for approving the processes also need to act as facilitators so that they can help smooth out the processes. So we need to work hard on this front.
And our study shows that we can work on a number of areas. For example, in the project, we have the engagement of professionals. Perhaps more tasks can be dedicated to professionals. The other point is about using digital technology. Now, we're required to write reports as part of our supervision. Is it possible to make greater use of digital technology? The other suggestion is database. After testing certain materials in a project, is it possible to put in the information in the database for reuse in other projects? I think we can explore these ideas. As I said in my opening remarks, the focus today is on finding out the major reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong. After listening to members' views, we will further mull over the major reasons for high construction costs and devise corresponding measures. Of course, we need to accord priority to the most needed areas for implementation. Perhaps at subsequent meetings, we can further discuss these proposed measures and inform members of the timetable. Mr. Edward Lau. I thank the Development Bureau and head of the office for explaining to us the reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong. I'm concerned about the high costs as well as lengthy construction period. In fact, in the beginning of this year, I moved a motion to discuss the same. I understand from the study findings that there are 5 major reasons. In the short term, we may not be able to address the problems in full, but in terms of, say, labor costs, materials, equipment, approval process, which area do you think has the greatest room for improvement? Now, I would like to give some suggestions as well. These are short-term fixes. Let's see if the Permanent Secretary agrees that these can be adopted. For example, can we adopt the central procurement approach in Hong Kong? It's not confined to the procurement of materials, but services as well. In fact, for aggregates and other materials, right before and after Chinese New Year, because of transportation issues, prices tended to go up. So perhaps the government could consider central procurement of aggregates for store them up for later use. So I hope the central procurement model can be set up as quickly as possible. The other point is about design standards and feasibility studies. Now, in a project, very often there are 2 stages of study. In the first stage, the consultant carries out the study, and then there is another study that follows. In recent years, we've seen successful examples, easy contract agreement, as well as other new initiatives that have proved to be successful. I think the nitty-gritty of the design should be left with the contractor, but the contractor should be able to participate earlier on. The third point, as you mentioned just now, is that there are professionals in Hong Kong, but despite the supply of professionals, we have a structural problem. That is, there is duplication in the approval process. We should make better use of self-certification mechanism. Say for lifts and escalators, self-certification is a feasible option. So for government departments such as a lands department, you should allow professionals to adopt self-certification in terms of building plan submissions. The other point is coordination among government departments. For example, the CEDD carries out site formation, and then the housing department takes up the project for installing piles, and I think a more coordinated approach should be taken to quicken the pace. Now, for design standards and requirements, they should be reviewed as quickly as possible. As mentioned just now, some of these standards are out of date. There may be excessive design in the standards, and some processes should be streamlined. I hope the permanent secretary can respond to my point. Now, I know that for other reasons, such as labor, things may be more complex, but at least on the design aspects, please give me a response per PS. Mr. Lau just now asked for quick wins. I think that we actually share the same thinking. That is, we'd like to look for short-term solutions to drive down construction costs. To respond to the point about central procurement, we are not just sitting on our hands. We are looking into using central procurement for certain projects, such as light public housing. For the second stage of light public housing, the prefabricated materials now come under the central procurement contracts. In the past, we rely on the subcontracting model when the main contractor would subcontract the works with labor and materials included, inclusive. Now, we ask the main contractor to carry out central procurement, and apparently there are benefits because of bulk purchase. Even if it's the government that procures the materials, we enjoy the same economy of scale. And we see this opportunity in terms of other materials. So in the future, we will try to implement this procurement on a greater scale. Now, there is something called term consultancy and term contract. We engage term consultants and we sign term contracts to cover various projects. And in fact, there is another model. We engage a consultant to oversee projects in the whole area. And these projects may include site formation works. In fact, recently, we have included another kind of works, and that is site investigation. You just need to conduct site investigation once. Things won't change all of a sudden, and that means site investigation can be carried out by a single term contractor for different projects to achieve cost effectiveness. Now, about build and design contracts, we find merits in adopting this model in terms of construction period and construction costs. This model is effective in driving down costs and shortening time. But this model is for larger projects. They come with limitations. The contractor should be capable of designing and building the structure. So our choice will be limited. And this is also our consideration. In terms of processes, indeed, we need to take things one step at a time. We conduct the feasibility study, and then this is followed by the detailed design and work stage, etc. And we are going to review the processes with a view to compressing the time frame. All I can say is that perhaps we can save efforts in conducting repetitive technical studies. Perhaps we can just add on the preliminary studies instead of starting another study at the detailed design stage. Professionals, I do agree that we can engage more professionals at the approval stage. But after all, it depends on what we are going to approve, as well as what professionals we have, because it's a mutual process. The professionals will also need to shoulder some responsibilities. Now, about coordination, is it possible to have just one government department taking things up? Well, say for site formation and superstructure construction, the housing department is the lead department. We have a very good working relationship with the department. For works of a simpler nature, the housing department will take it up as well. For works of a more complex nature, such as a retaining wall, I'm afraid the CDD will still need to take up the works. Lastly, about design standards and requirements, again, we see opportunities here. My colleague mentioned bearing capacity for underground rocks. In fact, we could conduct more studies to enhance the safety coefficient and improve the design. Despite no change in the geological conditions, we are now more familiar with the materials we use, and this would definitely help in shortening construction time and lowering the cost. There are different design standards, so it's a matter of priority. We need to accord priorities to different areas. Now, this is in fact quite important, Chairman. So, if I may, I'd like to give you another example about CDD. Very often, when we drill piles, we need to be aware of the existing structures and railways around the site, and we use a 3A system. If there is subsidence to a certain level, we need to suspend the works and gauge the level of subsidence. It's quite a rigorous process. The first tier is a subsidence of up to 20 millimeters. That is a rather rare scenario for this to happen, and the CDD has reviewed the process. At the moment, the department allows engineers and other professionals to assess the extent of subsidence before calling works to a halt. And depending on the circumstances, we could allow up to 100 millimeters of subsidence. And this can substantially help prevent project delays. Sometimes temporary works or temporary excavation may be involved, and so we need to consider the size of the site and the scale of the project. Mr. Chen Xiuhong, in the fourth quarter of last year, the Development Bureau rolled out the strategic study. It's been around 9 months. This paper sums up the specific findings, meaning the major reasons for high construction costs, including labor costs, contract risk premium on materials, equipment, design standards, requirements, project complexity, and approval process. These are, in fact, common knowledge in the industry. And these are indeed reasons for driving up construction costs. Based on the findings of the strategic study, the government will be making recommendations. Now, my question for the Development Bureau is when this strategic study will be completed. When are we going to receive the findings so that we identify the reasons and find solutions? This hinges on another issue. That is, among these reasons so identified, what are the reasons that are within our control and which are beyond our control? Because, like the case in Singapore, their costs are affected by the external environment, such as rise in construction costs, and because they import materials. So we need to find out the reasons and then find out whether they are within our control. Otherwise, it will be just a waste of time. Next question. In the past 5 or 10 years, have you looked into the relevant projects in an economic cycle, for example? Would it be possible that construction costs soared as a result of a particular event along the economic cycle? Do you have a timetable for capital works projects to be rolled out every year? Because otherwise, as the paper explains, some tenderers may submit a higher bid because of the volume of workload and the contracts they have already been awarded. They don't mind putting in a higher bid. So my question for PS is whether this is true. My last point is that I hope the strategic study will dive deeper. Say, we have the comparison in terms of the global ranking with Singapore, Shenzhen, Shanghai. But I want to compare things with Singapore at a different level. For example, in terms of wages, construction periods, and the relevant measures. For example, Singapore adopts a DFMA that is target-oriented, and they also adopt design for safety. Are these the reasons for driving down construction costs whilst boosting construction safety? I want to know whether this consultancy study will include these details for our comparison.
Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. Let me talk about factors within and beyond our control. When it comes to construction costs, they are not necessarily the same as the project costs. In paragraph 8 in the paper, we mention other factors which may affect the construction costs of the project. They may not be within our control. For example, the economic cycle, different tendering strategies of contractors, and so on. We are densely populated. We have a lot of cars on the road. We have a hilly terrain. We don't have a lot of land resources in Hong Kong. So there's a limit on the alignment. For cross-district projects, for instance, we don't want to involve the construction of a tunnel, otherwise the project costs will soar. We may not have to build underground car parks either. These are very costly projects. In relation to factors beyond our control, we are in a tropical area, so we are subject to inclement weather, materials, equipment. We import all of these. These are not manufactured or from Hong Kong, so the costs is beyond our control as well. There are also legal requirements to comply with. In relation to the volume of work in the private sectors, we identified a decrease, and this is not within our full control. So we set the timeline of the projects based on the necessity of them. Of course, we can make minor adjustments having regard to different factors. However, we mainly base the timeline on society demand or demand of the public. Regarding comparisons with Singapore, we have incorporated these factors in our strategic study. We have also compared Singapore with other cities as well. With these comparisons, we took a look at how the construction costs are minimized. We have already detailed the differences. How are they different from Hong Kong? We can draw reference from their practice and we can learn from these. We can learn from their practice so that we can reduce the construction costs as well. Member asked about the project construction costs and the economic cycle. Let me invite head of the PSGO, Project Strategy and Governance Office, Mr. Joseph Low, for more information. In the past decade, we have already collated some figures. Some contractors may have to compete for the tender, so the tender price may drop. By contrast, when they have a lot of works, then the tender price will increase. There's a certain correlation, but they may not be in exact proportion. That's all from me. Well, 2 questions have been left unanswered. Timeline and design for safety as seen in Singapore, which is useful for enhancing safety of works. Will Hong Kong draw reference and consider these practice? Thank you, Mr. Chan. Volume of works will affect the cost of projects. We have been working very hard to enhance the capacity in the industry. On the one hand, we want to enhance productivity of workers. On the other hand, we also want to introduce more competitive contractors or consultancies in order to contract the works in Hong Kong. We have already seen results. In Singapore, for example, they have their own practice, and we will also draw reference from their practice. Design for safety is not something new. For costs, for PWP with a certain cost, we request the use of design for safety. The Construction Industry Council has been advocating this. There are 10 works which have started to use this practice. There are pilot projects, so we want to enhance safety of the projects. We want to enhance and ensure construction site safety when they carry out the works. In relation to repair, maintenance, and operation, we also want to ensure safety on these fronts. In relation to the strategic study, our timeline is quite aggressive, so to speak. Within this year, we want to implement strategic measures, and we will ask members for your views. When we see eye to eye, we will put these measures into practice. Mr. Duncan Chiu. Thank you, Chairman. There are 5 main factors, as the authority explained when I talked to the stakeholders of the industry. They oftentimes mention lengthy approval process. They want to know whether these can be streamlined. 30% to 40% of the overall time is used to deal with paperwork. Contractors and subcontractors are starting to digitalize the paperwork. They have their own electronic platform. This is very useful for monitoring the entire process. What about the approval process? Will the authority consider digitalizing the entire process, not just about the submission of documents, but about making replies, approval, and so on? AI is the talk of the town right now. I agree with Mr. Edward Lau on self-cert. We can save manpower. So can we have a shared platform for the use of the industry? This way we can save time in relation to the approval process. Will the authority consider this point? Innovative technology has been advanced in these few years. I've been a judge in this regard. For Beam, Open Beam, we have been advocating these. In October 2018 to this year, a total of 4,068 projects have been approved, which involve $1.293 billion. Does it require additional injection? What is the latest situation of the fund? Just now we mentioned the high-strength steel, which is actually a new material. There are also the applications of robotics. However, after money is sought from the fund, it seems to be just POC. There are a lot of approval processes for new materials. Without studies like PolyU, it's actually difficult to advocate or to encourage the use of these materials by the industry. Do we need to give out further subsidies so that the industry stakeholders will consider using these materials? These are my questions. Thank you, Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Duncan Chiu. We're working towards streamlining the approval process as well as minimizing the time taken. We can go paperless with the application of BMI. We can start with the approval process. Recently, within the Bureau, we have already started a common data environment, CDE, which is a database. What is good about it? We can collect the information about the status of the projects, including the approval process. There's a dashboard so that we can check the status of the projects, what is being done, how much time is ahead, any comparison between this project and the other, how many rounds of approval are needed. They give us very good information so that we can conduct analysis. This way we can identify further room for improving the approval process. Next, looking forward, we will encourage the use of AI. First of all, monitoring. We have for a smart site safety system, we'll incorporate AI in order to enhance safety and to monitor safety on construction sites. Some consultancy companies have also used AI to design their works. This will help professionals to optimize their work so that they can work faster and they can spend time on processes that need the most time. AI is a major way forward. In relation to the INT fund, there are a total of $2.2 billion. We have used half, that is about $1.2 billion. At the early stage, we spent it on BMI and MIC. Just now we mentioned 4S, the Smart Site Safety System. We also have multi-trade integrated mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, that is the MIMEP, as well as the use of robotics. There's also equipment about bending bars, which is very useful to bar benders on the construction site. For main contractors or for consultants, they have started to use technology. For contractors, subcontractors and frontline laborers, they can also harness technology so that we can promote the use of technology not just at the level of main contractors but also at subcontractors. There's the approval of 1,200 applications, 60% are for SMEs, and we want to step up our effort in this aspect.
Chairman, if I may, I'd like to respond to another point, that is novel materials and technology. That is for more extensive adoption by the industry. The Development Bureau set up a task force led by Mr. Low, and we are the pioneers. We try these materials and technologies in universities, and if proved to be successful, we then consider whether there is opportunity of deploying the technology in other projects. If so, we then formulate the standards for wider application. In the process, we engage the buildings department because we want these materials to be used by the private sector as well. So apart from public works projects, we want to promote the use of these new materials to the private sector, and we've identified dozens of such materials. High-strength steel, as we mentioned, is just one example. In the middle of August, we set up the Research Institute for the construction industry. We earlier called it the Construction Innovation Technology Research Institute. Now we have upgraded this institute, which will look at various materials and technologies used by the construction sector in Hong Kong for wider adoption. So in August this year, we commissioned this center, and we will step up liaison and collaboration with other tertiary institutions. Mr. Benson, look, I thank the administration for giving us this paper. This is a rather straightforward, informative paper explaining the reasons for high construction costs in Hong Kong and the challenges we face. Now, according to the strategic study, construction costs in Hong Kong are the top in Asia. Labor cost accounts for 30–40% of the total project costs. So comparing to neighboring cities and our competitors, labor costs are really too high. According to paragraph 11 of the paper, one reason why labor costs remain high is the aging workforce, and according to the paper, over 40% of skilled workers are 55 years old or above. That means it takes much longer to complete the work processes. Well, the administration explained to us the use of automation and other technologies, but after all, it boils down to just one solution. If we're unable to attract new blood to the industry, we need to import laborers. Now, the government has just suspended the labor importation scheme for the construction sector so that no new quotas will be set aside. We must therefore turn to initiatives to attract new blood to the construction industry. In fact, we have APIs on TVs. We've also held talks in schools. We also showcase real-life examples of exemplary construction workers. Still, these incentives are not enough in attracting new blood. I'd like the administration to help us understand how we can better attract young people to join the construction industry. I think this is a long-standing problem. Next, on estimates, according to the letter from the administration to the subcommittee, they explained the number of errors. In 2018-19, the district cooling system in Kai-Tak, there was cost overrun of 27%, and then 2014-15 in Liantang, Hangyuan BCP, cost overrun of 54%, and then 2013-14 for Yinghua Girls' School, a cost overrun of up to 51%. According to this letter, according to the paper, among the 330 Category A projects, there was an outstanding balance of $1.9 billion, and that is the balance taking into account some projects that experience cost overruns. The conclusion is we should give more accurate estimates. Some projects manage to have cost savings and unspent balance. My question is whether it's possible to come up with more accurate project estimates. Yes. On attracting new blood to the industry, I think that we are competing with other trades and industries for fresh blood. The construction industry has this image that is rather out of date, but as members said, we are migrating towards a wider adoption of technology and digitization, and this is an ongoing process. This is the way forward for attracting young people to the industry. Now, in terms of average age of construction workers in the past few years, the figure still tends to be quite high, but then the trend is overall speaking stable. It remains more or less the same. That means over a period of a few years, we have been able to recruit more young people to replenish the aging construction workforce. At the same time, we need to adopt other measures to enhance productivity and attract new blood to the industry. In fact, we do have a large pool of construction workers in our register. We believe that there is great potential for them to upgrade their skills. By helping them upgrade their skills, we believe there will be a general boost of productivity across the industry. Now, accurate estimates. This is not an easy task. In terms of the cost overruns, incidents, many of these projects ran into unforeseeable circumstances, such as geological conditions that arose quite unexpectedly, In preparing the estimates, we weren't able to envisage those. Still, at the work stage, we have done a lot in terms of preparing estimates. And we've also strived to slash costs and save up. So I'd say that in terms of cost control, we are actually doing quite well, despite having some projects experiencing cost overruns. Mr. Gary Zhang. Well, I think the paper gives us a true picture of the construction sector in Hong Kong. Still, we need to ask them specific questions. For example, now that we know that the labor costs in Hong Kong are 2 or 3 times higher than those in mainland cities, we need to look further. Because even if you multiply that by 3 or 4 times, we're talking about 120% increase. This still alone doesn't account for the substantial increase in construction costs comparing to other developed cities. Now, in terms of design standards and requirements and approval process, these are all major reasons for driving up costs. You also explained the professionals spending 30 to 40% of their time on paperwork, but you have not explained to us how this impacts on the construction time or cost. We need to have a breakdown of the contribution of these reasons or factors to the escalating construction costs. I hope at subsequent meetings of the subcommittee you can give us the relevant information. So you need to quantify some of the statements here. The other suggestion is this. We will have to take forward reforms and implement new measures. Things will have to change, but it is difficult to do it across the territory overnight. And for ongoing projects, it may not be easy to drive a change. So we should focus on new projects such as those in Northern Metropolis. We should pick some projects as pilots. And then we work on changing the approval process, the cost estimates, etc. for these pilot projects. Will the government consider that? Thank you. PS. 2 questions. You asked for the statements to be quantified. Indeed, if we're able to quantify the data, it would be more useful in terms of preparing cost estimates. We have explored this idea with the consultant. It is not a simple equation for our comparison. There are many other factors that account for the differences in construction costs. Now, these are the 5 major reasons for high construction costs, according to our analysis. If you want the breakdown of how these reasons contribute to the construction costs, it's not easy to say. Let me just say that this is the consensus we've forged with the industry, and these are the prevailing major reasons for driving up construction costs. The next step is about implementing measures. For the wage levels of local construction workers, according to the study, is considered to be at a reasonable level, so there is little room for adjustment. We need to turn to the other aspect, and that is to enhance productivity. What can be done to achieve greater effectiveness? This is something that we will look into. Just now, Mr. Edward Lau asked for quick wins in the short term, and as I explained, we are going to have short, medium, short, and long-term measures. After implementing the short-term measures, we can then assess the effectiveness in order to take things further in driving down construction costs. We are taking this pragmatic approach because otherwise it would be very difficult to give you the contributing percentage of these reasons. About according priorities, again, we adopt this same line of thinking. We need to consider the impact on the construction sector as a whole. That means we need to engage the sector in our discussion to find out the pain points and challenges. We will take things step by step and then look for improvement.
Next member, Dr. Ben Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the authority for conducting a survey. I mean the study. It shows us some factors, and there's been much discussion about these factors. On the wages of construction workers, labor cost accounts for a large proportion, and it's understandable. We do need manpower to carry out works. However, if we need to reduce costs, we may need to introduce technologies. We may also need to introduce equipment. We would give bonus points to tenders so that they are more willing to put in more resources, or they are more willing to use technologies. This way we can reduce labor costs. This is my first question. I'd like to know if the authority is working on this. I've also noted the trend of the wages according to the Census and Statistics Department. The wage trend is quite different from the reality in the industry. It may be misleading. When the understanding of the wage trend is different, it may be statistically different. Does the authority have any adjustments of the wage trend? This will affect project construction costs in the end. So will there be any measures to reflect the wage trend more comprehensively or holistically? Will there be a better indicator? Regarding the fluctuation in the prices for materials, they are very important as well. I understand the authority is using central purchasing mode, and there are also measures which give more certainty to the procurement of materials. It'd be good if we can put in more effort. However, in the process of procurement, can we reduce costs? And by how much? Do we have figures to share with us? Overall, we can tell from the summary or conclusion of the paper that there are proposed strategic measures. Some members just now asked about a timeline. I understand it's quite difficult, but what about the priorities? Can you tell us clearly what will be done by the authority and what will come next? Do you have any priority in this regard? P.S. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Chen, for your questions. In relation to the use of technologies, we understand the investment needs to be borne by investors and main contractors. There's a fund to this end, and matching has been doing quite well. We can pilot the project, and when it goes smoothly, we can widen its use to the entire industry. We encourage consultants and subcontractors to think how we can better harness technologies. In a technical aspect of the tenders, there are certain points in relation to the use of technologies as well as new materials. We hope there is sufficient incentive for contractors or investors to use technologies. In relation to labor costs as well as worker wages, I believe there is some historical background in relation to the difference in the trend of worker wages. It may have to do with the reporting of the wages by workers, but more importantly, we want to identify the trend of worker wages. Employers can tell us more about the wage of the workers, but in relation to the trend of the worker wages, we want to know whether it's upward or is more stable. In our discussion with contractors, we want to better use this figure to reflect the change in the price levels. We are conducting studies to see how we can better fare well in this aspect. In relation to the central procurement model, we can see that some contractors are doing this on their own. When they have sufficient amount, the cost of materials can go down by 10%. They can save 10% of material costs. Will we be able, can they secure an even lower price with bulk purchasing? If the government is to be responsible for the central procurement model, we need to have sufficient amounts of the materials to be procured. As I mentioned, we aim to have strategic measures by the end of this year. Under the leadership by Chairman, we want to devise short, medium, and long-term measures so we can bounce ideas of members. Well, thank you, PS. We can refer to the wage slip of workers. Then we can know we can know workers' wages. So we can minimize the differences. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chairman. The paper we have just now is a report of the high construction costs in Hong Kong. But it doesn't tell us the type of the construction projects they compare with London, Singapore, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. I'd like to know the basis for comparison and analysis. The paper is also silent on quite many aspects of information. But I'd like to point out in late August, I took part in an activity and I went to Shenzhen to visit some construction sites. We went to a children's park in Longgang. We also went to visit some facilities in relation to the contracting methods. In this meeting, we want to mainly explore how the type of construction projects will affect the construction costs. We went to Shenzhen Talent Park. Well, the practice is different from ours. In the mainland, they don't subcontract the projects into smaller bits by the main contractor. In the mainland, by contrast, workers receive their wages directly. The organization only receives remuneration. And if the construction project is not good, if the quality is not up to par, basically the contractor will not receive the remuneration or the service fee, or they will lose their chance in future projects with the government. I'd like the authority to give us more information. And I'd also like to ask about the standard of local projects. For some children's park, the standard is 110 mm for the mat. However, in mainland, the standard is only 10 to 12 millimeters thick. That is a difference of 10 times. The standard is very different. I'd like the authority to give us more information. The materials required are more, and the construction time will also be longer as a result. The period of construction will be longer, but the paper is silent on these points. There are two tiers in relation to PWPs, that is, main contractors and subcontractors. However, some government engineers will monitor the documents submitted by main contractors, and there are also engineers in the main contractors who will monitor the engineers in the subcontracted level. So subcontractors will submit documents to the main contractors, which will then submit some documents to the government. There are engineers at 3 tiers. Will there be any waste of resources? Do we need 3 tiers of engineers to work on one single project? We need to look into this situation. Next, in relation to wages, the CNSD published information about workers' wages. However, does the main contractor tell us about the situation of workers' wages? Well, there are multiple tiers of contractors. Even when there are 10 tiers of contractors or subcontractors, they can also make profit. So we do need to look into the situation. So can the final report on the strategic studies tell us more information about this? Thank you. P.S. Thank you, Mr. Dennis Leung. Well, we need to go back and check more information about the questions asked by Mr. Dennis Leung. I will also ask my colleague to share more about different types of projects, those in Hong Kong, those in mainland China. We'll share more information with you regarding the children's park in Longgang in Shenzhen. Is quite similar to the managing contract. Which is rarely used in Hong Kong. Regarding standards, yes, we do agree. We use the standards left from the UK. There are also different requirements. So is there any room for streamlining the process? The paper does mention this point. We'll refer to the design and standards of materials. In mid-August, we already set up a relevant institution and we'll work on this. In relation to the approval processes, different tiers of professionals are involved. An engineer in the subcontractor will monitor the situation, and then documents will be submitted by the main contractors. Afterwards, the supervisor will have to approve the documents, and the engineer will have to make the final call. This will make the construction period longer, and this will also drive up the construction costs. We pledge we'll see how we can streamline the process. Regarding PWPs, there's a requirement. There can be more than 2 tiers of subcontractors. We'll implement this strictly. When we identify any irregularities, we'll talk to the relevant main contractors. Regarding workers' wages, we hope workers to report their wages honestly. However, in relation to the trend of workers' wages, they serve as very good indicators. And I invite Mr. Joseph Lo to tell us more about workers' wages and the type of projects. Thank you.
Thank you. The member asked the projects that we looked into when conducting the study from other places. Now, if I may ask members to read paragraph 6 and the relevant footnotes. The study has made reference to over 70 completed projects, including building, roads, site formation, drainage, and waterworks in Hong Kong. So after that, we made another comparison, as you can see in footnote 5, with projects in other cities in London, New York, Singapore, etc. And these are projects involving roads, viaducts, schools, hospitals, etc. We take 5 projects at least of each type for comparison. So according to the analysis, the project costs of Singapore and the neighboring Greater Bay Area cities are lower than those of Hong Kong by 20 to 70%. Thank you. Mr. Dennis Lau. Chairman, I'm asking this question because on the 19th of September, the 19th of July, the paper issued then explained the cost overruns for some projects, and they had to do with unforeseeable geological conditions not identified in previous site investigation. And that is why I don't think we should just give broad stroke descriptions such as buildings, roads, etc. We need more information in order to chart our way forward. Next, my turn. One of the tasks for this subcommittee is to find out the reasons for high construction costs. And this is also the title of the paper. We are discussing the strategic study conducted by the government. The study compares our situation with that in other cities. Now, it is understandable, in line with our general understanding. That the costs are lower than other major overseas cities such as London and New York. But when it comes to Shenzhen and Guangzhou, these cities are lower than those of Hong Kong by 20 to 70%. This is also the impression we have when we visited Greater Bay Area cities, but as to how much lower, I believe it's far more than just 70%. It's many times lower. You should make apple-to-apple comparison. Say if you have a 3-lane highway, can you give us a unit cost per kilometer of a similar structure? Or say if you build a school, can you tell us the unit cost per GFA, etc. I think we need this set of information for comparison. I think Mr. Gary Zhang's question is left unanswered. The labor costs may be 3 times higher than those in other mainland cities, but as far as materials and equipment are concerned, the pricing difference, the price differences should not be high. So I think you need to explain why the project costs are lower than, the project costs of Shenzhen and Guangzhou are lower than those of Hong Kong by 70% only. And the next question is on mandates or number of working hours of workers required in the projects in Hong Kong. I think this kind of calculation is a bit strange. In terms of mandates for projects per 1 billion Hong Kong dollars, in London, the same $1 billion could just help build one school, but in mainland cities, you can build 4 to 5 schools. Of course, if you build 4 to 5 schools, you definitely need more workers. So I think using 1 billion Hong Kong dollars as the denominator is not meaningful. Is there other way to gauge the workload apart from adopting this figure? It is rather pointless to refer to the dollar sign. Say, tell me how many workers are needed to build a school, to build 1 kilometer of highway, etc. Express the data in these terms, because otherwise, what is said here seems doesn't seem very meaningful. Mr. Ben Chen asked a question, and I need to follow up on that as well, about wage levels of construction workers. The CNSD collects information of wage levels by way of a GF527 form. But this self-reporting form is not an accurate tool. The figures tend to be lower. Usually it's the frontline workers fill in these forms. They only put in the broad figures. They don't put in other forms of payments. Is that the reason for the main contractor not being able to gauge accurately the costs involved and hence a higher risk premium? Like Mr. Ben Chen said, there should be an improvement to the wage reporting mechanism. Now, even for the index compiled by the labor unions, it may not be accurate. It may not accurately reflect different forms of wages that actually pass on to the hands of workers. Another question is on over-design and excessively high standards and requirements. In the past, we usually adopted the BS and EN standards, or the European Union standards. How do we now dovetail these standards with the Guobiao or GB standards, including materials adopting the GB standards? Well, actually, I've asked about the testing of Guobiao materials, and it's a rather cumbersome process. You need to test the same material twice because of different standards. So I hope that this matter, including innovation, technology, should be included in your strategic study, because when it comes to new productive forces, we're talking about optimizing various resources such as land, manpower, technology, so on and so forth. So, like the other member said, the government should pay directly into the accounts of workers, and the contractor's role should be one of management and nothing else in order to exercise direct supervision. apart from professionals and the construction sector, please make sure that you consult the workers and the labor unions as well, because they are at the forefront and they'll definitely be able to help you. Yes, we'll definitely talk to the trade unions. They are also our major stakeholders. Chairman referred to two pieces of information in this paper. Perhaps we didn't make ourselves clear. If I could turn to footnote 5 of the paper. Now, it says that the construction costs in GBA cities are lower than those of Hong Kong by 20 to 70%. So that's a 3 to 4 times difference. And about the comparison using 1 billion Hong Kong dollar as the basis, perhaps again we didn't make ourselves clear. Say if I spent 1 billion Hong Kong dollars to build a vehicular bridge or footbridge or flyover, how does it compare in terms of construction costs if this bridge were to be built in the mainland? So it's a comparison of costs. Now, on wage or estimates of wage costs, we require the contractors to submit the GF 527 form for our analysis. We need to compile indices to keep track of changes due to inflation, and wage levels account for one of the major components. So we ask contractors to return this form to us according to the payout of wages to workers. So we will urge contractors to properly fill in the forms. Now, Chairman also talked about another complex situation about different forms of payment. You have the main wages and you have other forms of payment as agreed between the employer and the workers. About advanced materials already in use by other developed cities, how should we introduce them into Hong Kong? Now, the point is, for materials going by the Guobiao standards, they are somewhat different from the materials that we currently use. So we need to make sure that they are tested and they meet our requirements before they can be put to use. Still, at the moment, it's a lengthy process. The problem at present is that this material may be tested in one project, and if it's to be used in another project, it will have to be tested again. The solution is that testing can be done at the Building Technology Research Institute, so that no duplicative no tests will have to be conducted again. And we'll also actively consider introducing materials into Hong Kong that have been tested. About being innovative in our system, we do agree that we should look for major overhauls instead of minor improvements. Central procurement, again, we consider what materials are suitable to be included. This is, after all, a rather new attempt. We will see whether there are other ways of innovation of the system. Let me ask a follow-up question on GF 527. This is told by a frontline staff. I was told that this staff member duly fulfilled the form. Duly filled in the form, and then there was an amount that stood out being too big, and then the staff would like to make an honest report, only to find that it would be very difficult because a lot of explanation will have to be made. Well, I think everybody needs to be practical. You should request the submission of payrolls and other proof to make sure that this wage index is useful. Let's see if anyone would like to go for a second round. We'll need to be mindful of the time limit. 2 minutes, Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Chairman. I expressed my views in the first round, and in the second round, I'd like to show some encouragement. I want to encourage the use of border technologies. In the Northern District and in Yuen Long, the CEDD did some good work. In the Loop area, from Fanling to Santine, roads may have to be blocked for a couple of months. I mean 8 months to 9 months. However, this time round, the roads were only blocked for, say, 3 nights or so we should encourage the use of new technologies. We should encourage the use of radar, drones, and vehicles that transport modules. These technologies are safe, efficient, and the disturbance caused to citizens is minimal. So we should encourage the use of these technologies. In Fanlang Bypass, the brand new high-strength steel S960 was used. It was used in Chang Kwan O Crossbait Link. But it was the first time to be used in a bridge. It's lighter and the time taken is shorter as well. It may be the first time these new technologies or innovative technologies were used, but I think the PS should encourage the use of these technologies. We can see that the results are indeed very good. PS. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Edward Lau. I did conduct a site visit at 2 a.m. in small hours. It was done in 2 hours. So I do think we need to encourage the industry to use new technologies and innovative technologies regarding 960. With the collaboration of the department, it was actually the first time around the world to use high-strength steel on footbridges. We can also standardize the requirements in relation to S960, a type of high-strength steel. Mr. Chen? Thank you, Chairman. For the project mentioned by Mr. Edward Lau, the PS said that he did pay a visit. Well, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to conduct a visit over there. That is the long-span bridge. In the pre-construction stage, if we can do this in the pre-construction stage, we'll be able to save construction costs. So we do need to step up the promotion of DFMA. Regarding the base figure of $1 billion, are there any considerations about construction hours? In Shenzhen, it may be enough to build 2 to 3 buildings. If we need to compare apples to apples, in general, papers from the government show that the construction costs are comparable. Well, I think the consultant should make reference to objective data. Exchange rates may be involved. I'd like to ask my third question. I'll be quick. The NEC new engineering contract is open book accounting. In paragraph number 6, while reviewing projects in the past, when NEC is used, do you already have a database in place so that you will have a solid foundation for further estimates and analysis? P.S. Thank you, Mr. Chan. There's another new technology to be used this Saturday. In small hours on this Saturday, there's a bridge spanning over a railway in Fan Lang. It's like a rotating bridge. Regarding prefabricated modules, we'll do our level best to promote the use of these modules. However, when it comes to construction, we think we need to use MIC. We need to use multi-trade integrated mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Prefabricated modules are not enough. This will be a better practice, and we'll do our level best. Regarding the project of $1 billion, we make a comparison based on construction projects of $1 billion. For example, probably we build a footbridge of 200 meters. In mainland, it is not $1 billion. How many workers will be needed in the mainland? In the UK, how many workers are needed? We did comparisons like this. It was an apple-to-apple comparison. Well, I'd like to supplement. When it comes to $1 billion, it's quite complicated. Why don't you conduct a comparison in relation to the size, for example, per square meter, per cubic meter? Well, we can go back and think about it. Per square meter, it depends highly on the nature of the construction project. The footbridge in the urban area or in the suburban area, there is already a difference. Our consultants are international consultants, and they are very experienced in this regard. I hope they can give us useful and professional advice. And I'd like to ask Mr. Joseph Low to give you more information regarding another question. Well, indeed, for NEC, that is option C and option D, there's a very clear breakdown. We can have information about the single unit price. Some may not use NEC, and we rely on the consultant to tell us the breakdown of these costs. So the practice is a little bit different. But in the end, we do want to compare the unit prices. Dr. Low, second round. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding how to enhance productivity in the industry, a factor I cannot miss is land. In fact, the development in the new territories requires the resumption of brownfield sites, and the operation of brownfield sites has a lot to do with construction industry. Construction materials are involved. On some occasions, multi-story industrial buildings are not the most appropriate. we may need other land resources. We mentioned this many times, and it's worth mentioning this point once again. That is, we want the government to set aside land for the construction industry to have parks in the area. For example, for MIC, we do need space in the mainland for prefabricated modules of MIC. When these modules come to Hong Kong, you need space to store these modules. They need to be further processed before being transported to construction sites. These industrially manufactured modules or prefabricated MIC modules, if there is sufficient land in Hong Kong, we do have the capacity to do so. So I need to mention this once again. In River Trade Terminal in Tuen Mun, well, it's possible, is indeed an option. It may not be sufficient for the entire construction industry, but we have water transport as well as land transport. These make it an ideal option. This way we can achieve a win-win situation. P.S. Well, we've heard Dr. Low. The construction industry has our support. We want to help it add value and transform. So with multi-story industrial buildings, we hope the construction industry will be able to make better use of the land. We understand, for example, large equipment or heavy construction materials cannot be transported into multi-story industrial building in Tlungkutan or in the northern metropolis. We will see whether we can set aside some space for modern logistics. We're actively working on this. We are also working to see whether we can earmark some site for MIC and for research and development. No other members would like to speak. I'd like to give a summary. In footnote 4 and 5, that is the comparison of the construction costs between Hong Kong and other cities. A total of 70 completed projects have been reviewed. So, what have you drawn reference from? Can you disclose more information? This will give the public a better perception or perspective into construction costs. So I'd like to see more comparisons in this regard. Well, of course, we can look for information from other areas, but it will be quite difficult for us to do so. If you have already done so, probably you can disclose the information and share it with us. If no other members would like to mention anything else, there's no AOB. It's about time. The next meeting will be convened in November. And in that meeting, we'll further talk about other measures to reduce the cost of construction projects, about public work projects. There being no any other business, meeting adjourned. Thank you.